My guest today is broadcast journalist Charlie Webster. Now, she has worked for Real Madrid TV and major networks including Sky Sports, BBC, and ESPN, covering global events including the Olympics and the Paralympic Games and FIFA World Cups. Now, beyond sports, she hosted BBC 5 Live's weekend breakfast radio show and made documentaries for BBC Radio 4, including domestic abuse and technology. But in the US, she created a podcast division for Lionsgate Entertainment, launching Lionsgate Sound in 2022. While there, she presented a groundbreaking slate of shows, including the award-winning Surviving El Chapo, the twins who brought down a drug lord, which she co-hosted with music artist and producer 50 Cent. She also executive produced the #1 CBS podcast, The No Good, Terribly Kind, Wonderful Lives and Tragic Deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman, and she went on to create the Webby award-winning viral podcast, SCAMANDA, and worked with ABC News to produce and star in a docuseries of the same name, which is our discussion today. So let's welcome broadcast journalist and executive producer Charlie Webster to the show. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very...
Your introduction, I was like, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah, it is so funny how many people I've interviewed, and when I do those, I guess, a little bit lengthy intros, some of them are going, oh yeah, I did that. So,
yeah. And then all these like visuals flash through your head of like every, like a little kind of snapshot of a film of every moment of the things that you mentioned. I was like, oh yeah. And now SCAMANDA.
I know it. And that's what I want to ask you about, because I watched all 4 episodes of the miniseries, which is ABC Hulu. And for you, though, I know that before the miniseries, you had this incredible podcast that everybody was gravitating to. But how did you learn about the story of Amanda Riley?
Without being too convoluted, there was a woman called Nancy, and she got an anonymous tip. If you haven't listened or watched SCAMANDA, I'll try and kind of explain how this happened. But Nancy got this anonymous tip, and the anonymous tip said, I think there's somebody in our community that's faking cancer. And so Nancy kind of looked into it, and at the time she was working for a TV show, and nothing really happened with that. And then she couldn't leave it alone, and it got very personal for her. And then she told me about it via somebody we both know. Again, totally convoluted. Sometimes this is how these things happen. And I was like, no, really? Are you sure? And then I was like, okay, I'm going to have a look into it. Can I look into it? She's like, yeah, okay. And so I started to look into it, and then went through all Amanda's blog posts. So Amanda is the subject of SCAMANDA, and she started a blog in 2012. So she had thousands, and that's probably a real underestimation of blog posts, because she posted so frequently, 3 or 4 times a week, every week for years and years and years. And I just remember, I know you're a visual person, so I just remember sitting there in a very old-fashioned way, just with everything printed, because I just needed to see it in front of me, just so like, I don't know, compelled in everything that Amanda was blogging about. And she was detailing this most intimate and raw journey about having cancer. And then I've got Nancy telling me in one ear that it's not real. And then immediately I was just like, okay, this would be a fascinating, at the time, it was more like a fascinating kind of psychological type show. And then to me, I was like, okay, this has got to be a podcast, as you did a wonderful introduction to me, which was so kind of you. Like, I've done everything, TV, radio, and podcast. But for this, I thought it needed nuance and detail in the podcast. And so I thought that would be the best way to do it, where I could bring her blog posts to life, which is exactly what I did. And then I kind of went on my own, I don't know, rabbit hole investigation into Amanda. And then lo and behold, made the podcast. And then, as you said, it went viral, and then turned it into a visual TV show.
Yeah, I found it so astounding how deep the scam was, and I think it what lasted 10 years.
Yeah, yes and no. Like it started in 2012 when Amanda was doing a blog post, but then she said to another woman who we reveal as the anonymous source on the TV show that she had cancer back in 2010. So you can count it at 2010 or you could count it at 2012 because she announced on her blog post that she was diagnosed with cancer for the first time at 2012. So bit of discrepancy. And then then she went through to like, I don't know, 2019, 2020. So I'd say it was like 7 or 8 years.
I mean, how did you? I mean, because you said that you had gone through all of her blog posts, so compiling the research must have taken forever. Because the 4 episode
Yes.
miniseries, what really the thing that I really loved about how you put that whole thing together was noticing all the little fine
Yeah.
details that a normal person is never going to figure out. They're going to look at it as face value. Okay, she's got cancer. She's dealing with all of these. She's going to chemo or whatever she's doing. But there were little signs even into the photos she was posting. Correct?
Yes, there were. So I'll do two sides to that because like, for me, it did take so much research, by the way. And Nancy did a huge amount of research, and then I came in and then I did a huge amount of research and then did my own independent investigation. And then we kind of like pulled everything we got together because it depended who you spoke to. Honestly, at the time, sometimes I was speaking to people that still thought Amanda had cancer. And it was before she was sentenced too. So I was trying to be careful because there's a lot of sensitivities around it because you make such a great point. We're pointing out this detail, like look at this picture, because Amanda's blog posts weren't just writing, they were hundreds of pictures all the time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures. So you imagine a blog post and then you've got like, I don't know, it's filtered with like littered with like 10 pictures accompanying every blog post. And so for us, we're scrolling through the detail, and the detail is the detail. So if you're Amanda's friend who you're seeing every day, you're in her church, you're in her community, you're not looking at what we're looking at. This is your friend. Like you're spending time with this woman. She's been inspirational. She's hopeful. She's like, I don't know, like we search for that as humans. We search for a good survival story and hope, right? Especially now. And so I think that it's so you've got to kind of put yourself in that position because this is one wasn't just somebody that was like sat behind a keyboard lying about cancer. This is somebody who demonstrated it. She had a shaved head. She fainted in church. She was taken off by ambulances. She was in hospitals. Her pictures weren't fake. They weren't AI. They were actual pictures of with tubes in. People saw her in hospital. She went for trials. So you're not going to question your friend or this person in your community that's representing that. And so it's important for us to get that detail across.
Yeah, and I'm not going to give away the details because I want people to watch this mini series, and because you do show the little details that were investigated and started to figure out and putting the pieces together. I think one of the biggest shocks to me was that she took this so far and so deep that I was wondering, is she believing what she's doing? Um, or was she just putting this whole thing? Of course, we know she put the whole thing together. She was basically a con man, and it was so. I mean, I literally tried to wrap my head around it because when you're watching the first 2 episodes, you're like, "Oh my gosh!" But then once that third episode hits, then you really start seeing the turning point of the whole story. And I could not believe that she would even fake going to an emergency room
Yeah, you asked
just
such
for
a good
photos. Those were
yeah.
her photo ops.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. If you think about it in terms of like, influencers now, because this was by the way the time, think of 2012, like Instagram was just starting, TikTok didn't exist. So the blog post or the mummy blog, the fitness blog was the influence of that time. So if you think, I suppose, of influencers today, they set up their, I don't know, kitchen and cook things, or they go to the gym and they set that up and then they take loads of photos. So I think if you think about it like that, it was a bit like that. However, it was far more complex because you know, there was situations which Amanda says were real, but not to do with cancer. And you said con man or con woman.
Yeah.
That's something I grappled with a lot because yes, Amanda did manipulate a lot of people. And some people don't particularly like me saying this, but I don't think, and I don't believe from all the evidence I've seen. And by the way, there is things that I've seen and I know that are off the record that aren't public for legal reasons. So I don't think for a second that it was like, ooh, what should we do? Let's fake cancer and let's con all these people. It was much more complex. And I know that's hard for people to get their heads around. And then, you made such a good point about like, how does somebody just keep on doing this? But I think it became very addictive. And again, I'll use social media as a reference. If you think about the hit that the dopamine hit that people get from likes or from views on social media, she was getting this constant intake of like, oh, I'm an amazing person, like I've got a purpose, and her whole identity became having cancer. So then I think it, like you said, did in a way she convince herself that that was who she was, or did it just become very, very addictive because she was somebody she became like a local celebrity. People knew this incredible woman that's surviving cancer and over again. It's complicated, I think, more than
It
just
is.
like I'm going to scam some money.
But I think the footage in the miniseries that really got to me, because I understand when people take something so far, but then it becomes their identity. They embrace it as their identity. And in a way, like you said, it's almost like a little miniature celebrity kind of thing. And the footage in this series that really nails that is when she is on stage at her church talking as confidently as she did. But when I look at it, I'm like, she was just soaking that in and living for that moment, because for her, it made her feel important.
Yeah. So the footage you're talking about is, and again, the visual is so important. You mentioned that I initially created it as a podcast and then turned it into the visual. And I think that, when I was making the podcast, oh, honestly, like you have to work so hard to try and create a visual for you, the listener, and for your imagination to really explain how this was done. So you're not like, nah, like what? Somebody fake cancer, and like I would have known, like but when you see the visual, you're like, wow, like why would you ever question this person? And that is a great example. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. That is a great example, because she's on stage, Amanda, in her church, which is a big mega church style, so a lot of people, and people are doing an offering to her, and they're coming to the stage while she's speaking and putting cash money, dollars on her, by her feet on stage, and she's giving the most uplifting and inspiring talk, but it's also connected with God. So you're also taking people's automatic faith and trust, because this person has been put on the stage by the church too, and again is giving, like you said, it's a powerful speech. It's powerful. Never mind, obviously we now know that it was a lie, but it's so powerful. This is not somebody kind of like shirking away. This is somebody leaning in to her narrative.
Well, one of the things that got me, because I'm a churchgoer, but one of the things that And I noticed that the other pastor that was on stage with her.
Hmm.
So I went back and I was wanting to see his actual reaction. And of course, he was just like, "Oh, this is great," because Amanda said something about you don't want to. A lot of people miss the miracle that God gives them,
Hmm.
and I sat there and I went, "That's not true," because
Really?
a miracle is defined as you don't have an answer as to how and why it came to pass, because in a church, in the church realm or the spiritual realm, it would be only God did this because there's no other explanation for a miracle. I don't think anybody in their right mind that if they received a miracle of any kind, there's no way they're going to miss it. Because God's not going to hand out a miracle and expect you to miss it. He's going to know that you saw it. And so when
Yeah.
she said that, I went, "Oh, yeah, you said that with the tone, with authority and fact, and everybody fell for it." And
Yeah,
I felt,
because she said it with such conviction, which is the
oh,
point.
yeah. I mean, she didn't even waver from that conviction. And I felt sorry for the church that she scammed because overall, church people usually never question if you are telling the truth or lying. So I don't fault them at all. It just showed how compassionate they are for those that need help, and they offer the help because that's in their heart, that's in their spirit. But when you were doing the mini series, what was the overall feeling now from those, not just the congregants in the church, but like the pastors of the church? What in the world did they think of all of this?
I just want to say I love what you just said because nor should people be questioned. And I think that's really important just because, and and I put this out there, so I do feel like responsibility, and I hope that in putting this out there, and you mentioned it, it's gone viral twice over with the podcast and with the TV show. It helps raise awareness of like manipulative, narcissistic type behaviors and how subtle they can be. But also, I don't want anybody to be questioned because nor should they. People need support. What about all the people that are suffering or that do have incredibly hopeful stories? It's important to hear those. What do people think now? Again, that's such a good question because when I was talking to people, I was surprised the compassion, not everyone, but the compassion that a lot of people had for Amanda that were her friends. Nobody sat there of her friends anyway and said to me like this woman's a monster. In fact, what they grappled with was what what I'm asking them about and what the mini series is about, the docu series, and what they know of Amanda just doesn't add up. It's almost like that's what everybody said. It's like that's not the Amanda they know at all, and that's really interesting because there was no element of, oh yeah, very little anyway. There was a few people that had noticed things and had tried to maybe confront, and especially like Amanda's husband's ex-wife and the anonymous source, and but the majority of people um just couldn't quite understand how this Amanda in front of them is the same Amanda that I'm talking about and that we're talking about right now. And then a
Yeah,
lot
because a lot of
were
people,
compassionate towards her.
yeah,
They were extremely hurt, but
oh, yeah.
when they were like, okay, I make it was all about their own pain, quite rightly, rather than them wishing ill on Amanda. It was actually quite the opposite of, well, they cared about her and they loved her and they just felt so deeply betrayed and were like, why she didn't need to do this. We loved her and we cared about her without her needing to do this. But that maybe speaks to the fact that a lot of people had faith. But sorry, yeah, carry on.
Well, yeah, because in the and I know a lot about mega churches, and I'll just keep it at that because the feeling is different there than if you went to a traditional, if it was Catholic, Methodist, Lutheran, or
Okay.
whatever. The feeling is completely different. And I know that if there was anyone that was like, is this for real? For them to even go forward to contact, let's say, the pastor of the church and say, hey, I'm not, there's just something uneasy about this. Only two things will happen. One, you're going to get discounted, and then your days at that church are numbered.
Mm.
And that happens a lot. And
I
then
have to say that's even the police, when they contacted the church, the detective, they closed down ranks even against the detective. But yeah, so yeah, you're
because
right.
and here's the reason why. They didn't close down because they were protecting Amanda. They were closing down to protect themselves, because we don't want to come across as a church and a community that got duped. And that happens a lot. So a lot of people just stay quiet and not to rock the boat and just let things go on. And in this case, it went on long enough till finally the truth came out. So I was kind of wondering who actually triggered the investigation. Was it Lisa Berry, or was it Corey's ex-wife, Alita Bernal?
No, it was Lisa, but a lot of people and Amanda thought it was the ex-wife of Amanda's husband, Alita, and it played into that whole narrative of like the scorned ex-wife, right? But that's not the case. And she actually was contacted by Nancy, who'd got the anonymous tip from Lisa, who in the podcast I kept anonymous because that was her request, and she decided in the docuseries spoiler that she wanted to say it was her and come out and speak more forthrightly. And so it was her and Nancy that started to try and contact people and warn people, and then they contacted Lolita, and then they did all kind of like come together a little bit and stuff. But it wasn't Alita, the ex-wife, who initially went to the detective or went to the media.
Yeah,
And
Lisa. Oh, no, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that, like, I think maybe yeah, Amanda wanted to believe that as well, and then because it would have been like the jealous ex-wife or the scorned ex-wife, but that is absolutely not the case. And then Nancy alerted the Detective Martinez, and at the time he was just one person in an office that in San Jose that had a million caseloads. You can imagine his desk, and it was really interesting that he chose to take this on. Imagine if he hadn't, because in the grand scheme of things, maybe people would look and go, "Hang on, it was only $105,000 that she stole." By the way, it wasn't. That was the wire fraud. That's in the end what she got convicted of. But there was more money, like the money on the stage that you were talking about. That money on the stage is not included in the $105,000. That's only the money that was sent through her fundraising page, through online, through the
Yeah,
internet.
that could actually be tracked.
Yes, exactly. Because that's the only way, which I found, that's what's, to me, is something that's super interesting about this too. And I say it, and I've said it many times, is that these behavioral crimes are harder to get because lying isn't against the law. And our law, our system, no matter where you're from in the world, is very adversarial. So we still haven't quite updated to the fact that, it's not as simple as, oh, I steal your property and you can prove it. Crimes now can be very psychological, very manipulative. Coercive control is a great example. It's so subtle. It's very often very hard to prove. Even in Amanda's case, like the only way they could prove it is through the fact that it was tracked through the wires. And if she hadn't have had an online fundraising page, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. So that's fascinating to me. And even when the detective got the case, he decided to take it on because, again, this hits differently. It hits here, it hits in the heart, it hits very like, wow, somebody could do that, because I think we've all been impacted in some way, shape, or form by cancer, directly or indirectly, and also through betrayals of families and friendships. And I think that's what people can relate to in this story. But then even the detective, we just mentioned that he went to the church and the church didn't speak to him. He couldn't even access Amanda's medical records and pursue the case.
Well, that was the thing that I knew Amanda figured out, because she knew she had patient and doctor confidentiality and no one was ever going to be able to get in there. But I love, and I'm not going to give this away, but I love the way they figured out how to get around it.
Yeah.
And that's really the start to where this whole thing started to unravel. And in a way, it was actually Amanda that screwed up her own scam. You know, even
Yeah.
though Nancy was doing this deep investigation, in a way, Amanda didn't realize that she was actually messing it all up slowly but surely, because she was leaving some of the threads behind that started to unravel.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. Because the evidence that was used was everything that she created. And she was very open and very public. And ultimately, there was no way that Amanda could argue against it because it was there in black and white from her own creation, as in her blog posts. And, it was ultimately the fact that in a blog post, she said she'd gone on to this trial and she'd also been treated at this certain hospital. And then Detective Martinez, who was the detective on the case, as you said, couldn't access Amanda's medical records and was phoning around these hospitals. And I just can't imagine that, because I think we think that, like, well, surely the law can do something. Surely the police have access. But no, it didn't matter that he was a detective. It was like, no, can't give any information, can't give any information. And I can just imagine him sat there getting like so frustrated. And then in the end, he was like, okay, just tell me, like, is this a patient at your hospital? And they had no records of her.
Yeah, but what was I'm just gonna say funny, but not funny, haha. What I found funny was, and I figured it out really quick, because you know the whole medical trial, and I know what the protocol is because I've been to medical research facilities before, talked to researchers, you know how trials are done, and in that section of the docuseries, I went, yeah, that's all a lie. Because there's only one very particular way in which you do a medical trial, and that wasn't it. And Amanda wasn't smart enough to realize that, and then that was her undoing.
Yeah. But then, yes, absolutely. But at the same time, if you're her friends or, in her community, you're not necessarily going to have that knowledge. And also, even if you did, it might not connect, because why? Your brain isn't questioning it. Your brain is, oh my gosh, I hope that we can do everything to support this woman and I hope she's okay. And also, I emphasize that she's a young woman with two kids. And I do think that plays into it,
And they're
because
not and they're not her kids.
no, her two kids are her kids.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Amanda
Yeah.
was pregnant. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
she had two of her own boys with her husband, but you're absolutely right. There was her stepdaughter, who she called her bonus daughter, which was the daughter of her husband, Alita's
yeah.
daughter,
Lita.
who's the ex-wife. I know. And again, this is like, I know this is a family story, not just, this is not, it's not just in a church setting. It's in a church setting, it's in a family setting, it's in a friendship setting, it's in an online setting. It's in every setting. It wasn't somebody that, sat in the church and just scammed the church, or just was, like I said, behind a keyboard. This is somebody that infiltrated all parts of people's lives. And I think that's again why it's so fascinating.
But you have there were two friends that are in this docu series. I loved the contrast of the two friends. You have the one where she doesn't have a lot of money, but she took what she had to help Amanda. And you could tell in this docuseries how hurt she was to be duped like this. But then you
Mm.
have the other one who gave her 20, 30 grand and never really wavered the thought about Amanda was lying until the very, very end. And it was the only thing that convinced her that she had been scammed. So the two contrasts between the two women, I I was it was such it
Yeah.
was I don't want to say beautiful to see. It showed the differences in, I guess, human emotion, human heart, how people think, how people have to be convinced that they're being scammed.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, you got one that got hurt to the core, and the other one is still trying to process it because she didn't figure out that Amanda was lying until the court said so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one of them's called Lindsay and one of them's Rebecca. And I love that you made that point because they are so different, which also shows that Amanda connected with so many different types of people. And Lindsay, who's the one that didn't have money and couldn't give money, but wanted to give her heart, her prayers. And I say prayers because it was the first time she'd actually been to church. And the first time she ever prayed was praying for Amanda. So the betrayal is like so deep. And I think, again, that's something that I'm really passionate about in the stories that I tell. And it hopefully shows, and very much how I approached this story to create Scamanda was that we so often look at money, right, and transactions, but that's not what I don't know, the majority of the long term harm is. Because yes, it's awful if somebody scams you out of money, and that's terrible, and it can like absolutely ruin some people financially. But also, it doesn't outweigh this like emotional harm and betrayal, which can then create. Well, I mean, Lindsay doesn't go to church anymore and doesn't have faith, and because of what Amanda did, um,
I was
because
wondering because
yeah,
I felt hurt for her because I know many people who are young Christians, young believers. They go to the church for the first time, and some of them they dive in wholeheartedly, and it's great. But this to me went far beyond the financial side. You
yeah,
ruined somebody on a spiritual level, and for some people, that it may take a decade for them to get over it and move on because that's when they're going to have to understand and practice forgiveness and just realize that they didn't do anything wrong. They generally reached out to help someone. Yes, you got hurt, but God's looking for a person like you who gave their heart, who didn't question. And so I feel more pain for her for having been spiritually damaged because we can overcome most financial damage, but spiritual damage, some people never get over it.
yeah, and it's that trust, like you the abuse of trust is not just about you trusting someone else, it's about you trusting yourself to make the right decisions and to make how do you trust yourself? I think that's one of the most damaging things that somebody who does something like this, that takes advantage of people or betrays people, is one of the hardest things to try and work out and overcome, because then you end up questioning everything, which is like really hard. And also, Lindsay was going through a really tough time as well, and definitely was working through her own vulnerabilities and her own mental health. So, wow, imagine, that you've already had so much mistrust in your life, and then, you put faith in somebody and you believe in somebody, you see that person as hopeful, and it was all a lie. But then I do want to mention that on this other side, we've got Rebecca, who you said was the woman that had the money. She was the biggest donor, yes, 20 grand, maybe even 30 grand. She wasn't
Yeah.
even sure fully how much she donated. However, I can tell you that the deep emotional harm is the same. And that's what's really interesting. It doesn't matter how much money any of them had. Like, I do know, I remember, I don't think she'll mind me saying that when the docuseries came out, even though I'd spent time with her with the podcast and the podcast coming out, it just created again just this overwhelming emotion of like hurt and betrayal and upset. Excuse me. And, you know, for her, it was the same depth of questioning herself, like, because she knew Amanda for a long time, far longer than Lindsay. And she also knew Amanda's mum. And so she felt duped by the whole family.
Well, that was the thing that also how you took this so deep because you took your investigation by wanting to know what kind of child Amanda was. Why was that so important to tell that part of the story?
I think I love that you said that. The reason why I laughed is because it's just also who I am. Anybody that knows me, they'll know. I do. Like I'm a very like always looking underneath the surface, and I love psychology and I love how we behave, and you know I think that's influenced by my own life. You know, I've written a book about trauma, and so I do take things very deep because I think storytelling is so complicated and complex, and I think we can all relate in some way to these things. And what's I think what captured people's imagination about this was the fact that Amanda could be anybody's in your church and could be in your community and isn't just some like high roller that's like, I don't know, scamming people in banks or crypto. But yes, I was interested in her childhood because, well, my brain went in two ways. It was like, what's going on in the marriage? Firstly, I was like, what's the husband doing? Is there some kind of like, you know, I don't know, like manipulation here, coercive control? And then it was like, what happens in her childhood? And look, sometimes there's not always an answer because I remember digging into her childhood because I wanted to understand the how does somebody do this? And I think that was the biggest question is why, and how? Who is this person? Is this person a monster that's just got absolutely no empathy, no emotion, is evil? Or is this somebody that's, you know, been, you know, it doesn't make any excuses, but it is somebody that had, you know, was went through abuse? Is it somebody that was neglected, that felt like they weren't enough? I don't know. My head always goes to those
Well, you
places.
know what's
Why?
well, here's how I looked at it. And what is, now that social media is this massive explosion all over the world, everybody's going to be looking at one or two accounts every single day. And now we're hearing, and I get pitches all the time. You want to talk to Dr. So-and-so about narcissism and all of this. And I'm like, oh, please go away. But here's the thing when you look at Amanda and there is a narcissistic situation here, but it stems from an insecurity. So many people think, oh, that person's so narcissistic and arrogant. Yeah, but that's because they're insecure about something and they're trying to cover it up to make themselves feel valued or important. And in this case, that's what Amanda was actually doing, but it went way too far. And what even stunned me more was that she knew she was being investigated and kept on doing it.
Yeah. So yes, it was from deep insecurity and this like need of validation and attention, and then once she gets that, it's like self-fulfilling, right? Then you carry on, you do it again, and you like it's like that. I mean, I'm using like examples that aren't, it's not obviously nowhere near as extreme, but it's like that the naughty child that we see at school. It's not because they're bad, it's because they are wanting attention, and so they realize that they can get attention by being naughty. Sorry if that's a poor example, but
it is because I can see.
It's like Amanda. That's where she could get. That's where it fulfilled her. So you just keep doing it, right? It's like addictive behavior in a way. Like it fulfills you, and you get that feel good thing, and then you do it more. But in terms of like, yeah, she did know she was being investigated towards the end, and she just dug her heels in even more. But again, I thought a lot about this, and I've spoke to Amanda too. This isn't all just like me. This is not my opinion. A lot of it is based on like speaking to so many people, and there's people I spoke to that aren't even in the podcast and the docuseries. And you brought up a great point that it takes so much research, so much time. You live and breathe these things, and so much like you wouldn't believe it takes over your life. Whenever I make a story, I'm on one right now, and I'm literally like,
Well,
have no life.
I can picture that you have this dark room with this crime board, and there's all this red string going from one article to the next, trying to put all the pieces together.
Exactly. I have like a million post-it notes, like literally stuck everywhere, like this crazy professor with my hair everywhere. Like, yes, that's exactly what it looks like half of the time, honestly. And just notes scribbled everywhere, thrown on the floor, and like, oh no, what, and even when I was making Scamanda, I was like, did I do that bit? Did I like finish that bit off? Did I like end that bit? Did I make sure people knew about that bit? And honestly, like, you do your own head in. But anyway, yes, Amanda did know she was being investigated, but again, right? I'll walk you through it. This was her whole life. This was her identity. This was her community. This was her friendships. This was her family. So think about it as in like, people tell a lie, and then they have to tell another lie because they told that lie. Then they have to tell another lie and another lie and another lie to get out of the original lie. And then they're just in so deep that if they go, okay, yeah, I just lied, but I also lied about that, and I also lied about that, it's very hard for people to do that. And I think with Amanda, if she said, yeah, it was all a lie, she's going to lose everything. And sometimes the best thing what people do in human behavior, this is normal human behavior, is you just double down, double down, double down, double down, right? And because how do you even get out of that? She was in so deep. This wasn't just like one little lie that led to another lie. She was in so deep that, and I don't know, in hindsight, she probably wishes she just stopped, because in the end, she's actually lost everything. And I remember talking to her when she was in prison, and, she said something along those lines. It's like, I don't know why I didn't just stop. And I think our brains are complicated, and yeah, she
Pride.
and
It's
pride, and
pride.
also just like, how she's in so deep that, yeah, like I don't think for a second she imagined she would go to prison. I think if she knew the consequences, right, she would have probably put her hands up there, but she didn't. She just dug deep and just carried on lying, which, people do.
Well, yeah. Well, how many charges were filed against her?
There, in the end, she just got like one count of wire fraud, because it was very hard to, as we talked about, to convict her for anything else, because lying isn't against the law. And again, it's like, the way the law works is not about emotional harm all the time. And I think the strongest evidence, and it's also about, having the strongest evidence to be able to convict somebody, was through the wires. And there was no way it could ever be argued, because you've got all her blog posts, and then you've got her medical records, which in the end the IRS did access. So it was the IRS that ended up actually being the convictors of Amanda,
Oh,
because the only
yeah.
way she could be convicted was through tax, through wire fraud, through IRS, through the fact that, and that even, let me tell you this as well. I'm not sure if it is mentioned in the documentary, actually, is that she even used that narrative to help her, because she told people, and because it didn't go to trial, it went to a grand jury, which was closed. And so she told some people, when the police were sniffing around, oh no, I just didn't realize I had to pay tax on the donations. That's why the IRS are looking into me. So
Yeah, boy, she figured it out really quick.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, but anyway, what were we talking about?
Well,
There's
why?
so many like
Well, why
sparks
was
to this.
Corey never charged?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, before I say anything, Corey was not convicted. I must say that too, for any of Amanda's crimes, um, you know, the police did look into both of them, and I know that the detective doesn't think it was just Amanda, but the reason why they just ended up convicting Amanda was because, again, without being complicated, but this wire fraud that comes in, this fundraising came in under Amanda's name. So their strongest case was to go with that because that's how Amanda got convicted. So the money didn't come in through Corey's name. But I will say that Corey, for those that haven't watched, like Corey is Amanda's husband. They've been together a long time. You can answer the question yourself about whether, if that was your husband or wife or family member, whether you would know something was wrong and this person was lying. That's what I would say. And also that at the time, Corey was going through a custody battle for his daughter from his ex-wife, Alita, and cancer was brought up in that custody battle. And it was a battle, like they weren't agreeing, and cancer was used. His wife's cancer by him, and also he claimed bankruptcy because of Amanda's medical bills, and he's also said under oath that he went to Amanda's medical appointments.
I saw that. And the other thing that I noticed too with Amanda, in a way, it's almost like she knew how to cover up part of her tracks because she would take some of the money and donate it to other organizations, which made her look good.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's her trying to justify what she's doing herself to try and be like, oh no, I am helping people, or it was to cover her tracks. Like I honestly don't know. I do feel it was to do with the fact that, oh well, no, I'm helping people, because she did go and do fundraising, and she was part of the American Cancer Society, and as a spokesperson. She also went to cancer groups, and young persons cancer groups, and actually. One of the people contacted me since the docuseries and just said, like, I led that group, or I was part of that group, and thank you for doing this. I just can't believe it. Yeah, I don't know why she did that.
Wow.
Did she go there because she was getting information, or did she feel like she was really did? Who knows? I don't know that.
Yeah, that's the
Only
thing about
Amanda
this.
knows.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing about the docuseries. One, it leaves us with a question mark about Corey. Two,
It does, but if you read
yeah,
between the lines of what I've just said, maybe it doesn't.
yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean because then, like you just said, if she was going to all of these other groups, how devious really, how devious was Amanda in this whole situation of taking it way deep. I mean, no wonder it so many people were like, she really faked it because she pulled out all the stops. You know, I looked at it. I don't even know if scam is a good enough word here because it
I
just
agree.
runs so deep. But
I agree.
how many times did you speak to Amanda while she was in prison?
Um, I've many, like I couldn't even tell you a number. We spoke by email as well, so let me include that into it. So in
Okay.
terms of, like, we spoke over video call and some calls sometimes, and then but initially we wrote to each other many times over the course of her being in prison, and we also messaged each other before she turned herself in, because when she was sentenced, she didn't go to prison straight away. She had time to sort out her affairs, which is quite common, and because she wasn't seen as a flight risk, and to make sure that her kids were settled in school for that new school year. And then she turned herself in. She had a turning date. So during that period, we messaged because I actually approached her at her sentencing afterwards, and just gave her my details and said to her, look, I'm looking at telling your story, this is who I am, and I'm currently looking at doing this, and if you want to speak to me, I'm here. And the reason why I did that was because at the time, what if there was more to the story? And I'm a journalist, right? So it's really important that I try my hardest not to, and I hope I've had great, amazing comments about that, because I don't really believe maybe some people didn't like it because maybe they wanted me to be like, yeah, I'm going to tell you what I think in terms of she's a monster, but that's not my style. And I don't think you would be even talking to me about Scamanda, because I don't think it would have been so big if I'd have inserted myself and my opinion and forced it down your throat. So for me, it's really important to like cover all bases. And at the time, I didn't know whether there was more to the story, and it was important for me to get to know who Amanda was, so I could also do an accurate portrayal and take you on a journey of what she did. So then, yeah, we text each other during that period, because I asked her if she wanted to do an interview, she wanted to sit down with me, if she wanted to tell me why, what, anything, how, what, why, and again, remember, this is before I made the podcast, and as I was just starting to dig into things, and I still have that, we still have some questions around it, and only Amanda really knows why. But she decided not to do the interview for the podcast, but did keep in contact with me. And then immediately I told her that we were making the TV docuseries, and I said, look, do you want to be interviewed again? Do you want to say sorry to your victims? Do you want to explain why? And she decided that at the time it was best for her to serve her sentence out. And she did tell me that she was sorry. And then, yes, she declined to be interviewed in the docuseries. But I did record a little bit after speaking to her to tell you what she'd told me at that time.
Yeah, because I was wondering, was she just sorry because she got caught?
I don't know. We'll have to ask Amanda, right? Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm,
Now,
yeah,
well,
we never know, because the problem is it's like that. What's that? You'll know it better than I do. But what's that like? Wolf in sheep's clothing. Like, and once you lie, you'll never be believed again. So if she is really sorry, then people might not believe her anyway. So it's about what people believe, because we'll never know if she is really sorry or she's just saying it. To me, like, she has said she's sorry. I've seen her very upset, and but again, I say that not because that's my opinion. I'm saying that because that's what she's told me, and so I'm just telling everyone what she's told me, and it's up to you all to make your own opinion of whether you believe that or not. And let's see if Amanda ends up coming out in person and saying I'm sorry, and explaining, and not explaining why, but I don't know,
well,
maybe
I'm
help
I'm just
victims understand why. I don't know.
yeah, I'm just happy that there's someone like you that came out with an unbiased journalistic project, and
Well,
that's how
thank
I looked
you.
at it, because this whole docu series to me, part of it was about Amanda. The other part of it, it was a human interest story, because
Exactly.
there were so many people involved here, and this was an emotional roller coaster for so many, even probably more so after she got convicted. Now I know the judge threw the book at her,
Hmm.
because the sentence that would normally be handed down would be 18 months, but she gave her 5 years. But how long did Amanda actually serve?
So she's currently in like a halfway house, like a reintegration type house. She's still under custody and under arrest, but she's just not in prison. She got out of prison in like early January, end of December, early January of 2025. So this is all very now. Like, even when I was making it, as I said, it was all in the moment. It wasn't. I didn't. You know, I remember some people saying, "Where can I read about this?" And I'm like, no, no, no. I made the thing. It wasn't something that I copied of something else. So it's all, it's all been process as I'd been making it as it's going along. So she came out of prison, early January 2025, and she's in a halfway house, and her due date to be released out of custody is the end of this year, 2025. So in total, it will be 3 years, maybe even less. But she was given 5 years federal. But again, I suppose it is quite common to have time taken off for good behavior. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
Yes.
I can't picture her shanking somebody in prison, so I think it'd probably be good behavior.
Yes. No, neither can I. Yeah. So, but the judge did throw the book at her and said, I can see how you hurt so many people, and the judge called her an actress. And I was in that court, and I, again, at the time, I was still speaking to a lot of people. I remember like the first time I met Lindsay was in the restroom at the court, and I was like, who's this? And even that day, she gave a victim impact statement, and Lindsay's the woman you were talking about who didn't have the money to donate and that prayed for Amanda. Was the first time that she prayed. That's who we were talking about. And I remember she still wasn't convinced until that morning of the court, which is when I first met her. But the whole courtroom, when the judge said, I can see why, and she said it with such conviction and so like, she didn't kind of exaggerate or like it was just, I can see why. And, you've hurt a lot of people. You're a good actress. You even are an actress to me, because Amanda spoke and, to the judge and spoke to her victims. And, she said, I'll give you 5 years. She said it in like months, but I'm terrible at math. So 5 years. And the whole courtroom just went, I'm not kidding. Imagine me doing that with like a full courtroom. And it was a full courtroom. And everybody just gasped, and it was deadpan silent. It was almost like people were holding their breath, and people were shocked. Even her victims, everyone was shocked, because it was 12 to 18 months was the recommended sentence. And then nobody really knew what to do. Everybody just sat in the courtroom like, what? It was, really interesting atmosphere.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And what an incredible docuseries you created. So what are you working on now? Or maybe that you could actually mention.
I know. I actually can't wait for you all to get to know what I'm working on now. I'm using like non-specific language because I can't quite say yet because we've not announced it. But I think if you loved, maybe that's the wrong word, if you loved SCAMANDA, but if you found SCAMANDA very interesting, and thank you for what you said, that it was about human behavior. And so that's what I'm fascinated in. And I think that's, what we all deserve, that kind of complex behavior that can help us understand and maybe reflect our own lives or some of the things that we've been through, or give justice to things. And so the thing I'm working on at the moment will be out this year. And I think you're all going to love it. But as you can tell, because I'm just like rabbiting on, babbling and beating around the bush, that I'm not allowed to say anything. I promise you, it's not because of me. I'm just not allowed. But there is something that I'm working on right now, and I'm in the thick of it. So I'm in, we were talking about when I was making SCAMANDA, I'm in that same situation again, where I'm waking myself up in the middle of the night, going and talking about what I'm writing about and what I'm talking about. And I'm in that crazy situation where I've got Post-it notes everywhere. I've got the string everywhere. So I'm just in it again. But
I love it. Yeah, when I talk to filmmakers, it's the same thing. I'm working on something, but I'm not really allowed to say what it is. And but I get it. That's what media is all about. And wow, ladies and gentlemen, SCAMANDA is available on ABC Hulu. The mind-blowing 4-part docuseries. In 2012, a young San Jose mom started a blog documenting her journey after getting a devastating diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma. But the blog quickly took off as she went through treatment after treatment, and she wrote about being told that she would not live to see her 30th birthday. But despite the terminal prognosis, Amanda C. Riley became a beacon of hope, bravery, and perseverance. And she had a gift of immediately connecting with people, which she used to her advantage. But her blog told amazing stories of generosity, grace and love, rallying friends and family and strangers to help. But someone believed that Amanda Riley was lying. But for the rest of the story, you'll have to watch the docuseries, as Charlie Webster's hit podcast, SCAMANDA, became the source of this docuseries. The 4-part episode limited series peels the many layers of this incredible saga, revealing never-before-told details of the investigation, the friends and family who supported Amanda, and what has happened since the podcast ended. Well, Charlie, I want to thank you so much for, giving us a bit of the inside story on how you brought Amanda Riley, forward for the whole world to see.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great talking to you, and I loved all your points too. It's just so, you can talk about this all day, I think, because it's just such a fascinating, complex examination of what some of us are capable of.
Oh, absolutely. And I like watching crime shows. So sitting there and in front of the television, and I guess all of us become detectives. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, when you watch SCAMANDA, you're going to sit there and do the same thing. You're going to start thinking about putting some of those points that they go in and go, so that's what happened. Or, well, what about this? I think there's a lot of unanswered questions left in SCAMANDA, but as time goes by, maybe we'll know, maybe we won't. But are we now to the point to where we have to question everybody's human behavior? That's something that we're all going to have to ask ourselves. But for those of you who, you like to donate, you like to help people, don't stop doing that.
Yeah.
Let your heart move you forward to help other people. And if it's real, great. If it's not, don't worry about it, because you were being you. You were being a giver. And that's all that we want to see in everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching. And as for me, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.